Hey, everybody, one students. Good morning, afternoon, whatever it is for you guys. It's morning for me. I'm making this video, but let's kind of continue on with the 8 characteristics of life. So I kind of want to get through the last two, and I want to talk a little bit about scientific method that we did our lab on with the paper airplane, and we're going to do another lab on this next week with microscopes. So I'll send that out to you probably Monday, and our e-learning will be very similar to last week. You just have to do the title, the purpose, and the procedure, and I'll send a little video clip about that too, probably tomorrow. So I think we left off with number 7. So this one you've been drilled on in middle school and maybe environmental science for the regular bio students. And living things are made up of cells, and that's the smallest unit considered fully alive. So you can't get anything smaller than a cell and still have life. So that means the smallest living thing on this planet is a single-celled organism. Okay, bacteria, things like that. Cells can grow, they can respond, they can do all those characteristics of life we've been talking about. They have DNA, they have they grow and develop. They do all the life characteristics. That's why that's the small as you can get. And despite their small size, they're hugely complex, as the slide says. And we know that from mitochondria, Golgi apparatus, those types of things, they're very highly complex. They're almost like a big city. I used to do a assignment in my classes. If I had the time, I'd do it again. And we may when we get to the cells. But I used to have this assignment where they had to describe the cell like a factory, and what part of the factory, what job does it do in the factory? And the question I always ask my students is, you tell the class, they used to do presentations, what makes your part the most important? And all of them had convincing arguments. But when we got to the very end, I asked the question, so which one's the most important? And they always would say, that we can't say, because all of them are important in their own way. And that's how a cell works. Everything has to do their job. And without all of them doing their job, then we don't live. So that's very important when you're talking about cells. A single branch of one tree. So think of a big oak tree and how many hundreds of branches it has. And just one branch has 1,000,000 cells. We have 100 trillion cells as a human. So cells are very plentiful in most organisms. And that's why we can live the lifespans that we do, is because we can say, hey, blood cells, you do your thing. Skin, you do your thing. Muscle, you do your thing. And by all of them working as a collective unit, then our bodies work. I teach anatomy, and I always emphasize that to my students that, man, if something shuts down your body, your kidneys aren't working, your heart's not doing well, your lungs aren't working, everything's affected. So I think that's basically the concept we have to understand with cells, is everything has to work as a unit. I coach sports, and I used to coach basketball and team sports. Any of you that play team sports know that sometimes it's hard to get all the players on the same page. And it was hard just to get 5 players on the same page. Baseball and football, even more so yet, when you got 11 or more kids out there. So, it's amazing that we can get all these things on the same page. And you can see why we can have disruptions, and sometimes things don't work well. And that's just part of life. So that is the 7th characteristic. Okay. The 8th one is over generations, groups of organisms evolve. They change over time. I'm not necessarily talking about the controversial man evolving from a common ancestor. It's on that slide. That's just part of evolution. I always tell students that understand something, that not all of evolution is controversial. I know it's a hot button topic for some people, including myself. I don't believe all the parts of evolution, and I teach a little differently than maybe some public school teachers do. But I think we have to understand that evolution does happen. We do see it on the large scale. Maybe if you believe in creationism, evolution, that debate, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about we change. We don't look like we did when we were a baby. We see adaptations occur. We see animals that look different today than maybe what they look like back in prehistoric days. So we do see that. So remember, I'm going to emphasize this again. We're going to take a little mini test quiz next week, and understand that you need to know these 8, the things that are in red. Hopefully you paid attention to. So I'm going to have 8 things listed, living things blank, and you're going to put down living things have DNA, living things evolve, living things have cells, living things grow and develop. Okay. So make sure you know these 8 things. Okay. So that's very, very important that we know that. Hopefully you don't have any questions on those. They're pretty straightforward. Most of those you've heard of before. Just a good review of things. Now, what I mainly wanted to talk about today is this next slide. So let's talk about the scientific method, and we put it in practice with the paper airplanes. We're going to do it again with microscopes this next week. So what is a scientific method? A scientific method is a logical, orderly way to solve a problem or answer a question. This is what separates science from all your other classes that you might take. We have a method that we use. We have to be able to back up what we say in science. We can't just come up with a theory and say, oh, this sounds good. So what my gut thinks. We got to have proof in the pudding, as the old saying goes. We got to back it up. And that's what I've always liked about science. Now, understand that scientific methods vary, like what Mr. Anders does in chemistry down the hall from me, or Mrs. Newby does in physics, is maybe a little bit of a variation of the scientific method than what we do in biology, but we all use some type of logical, orderly way to solve a problem. And it always starts with a question. What propels science forward is asking questions. And that is something that is very, very important in science, is that we continue to ask questions. So these first 2 things are done before we do the experiment. We make observations. We come up with questions, and usually it's questions plural. Let's use COVID-19 because that's the big thing right now, right? And we have researchers around the world doing just that on the screen. They're asking questions. They're saying, hey, how is this thing behaving? How is it affecting this person? Does this treatment work? Does that treatment work? Why does it affect some people worse than others? Why are some people asymptomatic and some people have severe symptoms? All of this stuff has to be addressed. And we have to take all of these things into consideration and look at them and research them and do all the background information on long before we ever come up with a vaccine. Yeah, we'd like to have a vaccine tomorrow, but we don't do these things. We don't do them properly. We're not going to have a safe vaccine. So that's what we're doing in science all the time. We're asking questions. We're making observations. We're coming up with new ideas. That's never going to end. Okay, so that's where we start all scientific investigations, with observations and asking a question, and then we move into these other things, right? Then we collect data, the longest phase. Now, I'm not talking about collecting data like we did with the airplanes. I'm talking about collecting background information, observing, measuring, sampling, organizing. All this is done before you ever go to the lab and do an experiment, or go outside and do water testing, or whatever we're doing. Not the fun part of science, painstakingly time-consuming. Luckily for all of you, this is done for you. So when we give you a lab and it has this big section of background information, that is scientists somewhere in the past that have taken the time to gather all that information for you. Okay. And then after we do that, we do a hypothesis. Now, a hypothesis is not a guess. A hypothesis is an educated guess based on all this up here, right? All the research we've done, all the background knowledge we've gained, all the things we've observed. Then we come up usually with one or more, usually more hypotheses, plural. And from that, then eventually we get to this predicting stage, and we say, if this happens, then this is what will occur. Okay, so the predicting is again a prediction. Think of horse racing. We make a prediction. Oh, this horse is supposed to win, and here's the odds. And we all know that they doesn't always win. That's why they run the race, and that's why they bet on horse racing, is because the one we think is going to win, it doesn't always win. And sometimes a hypothesis is that way too. What we think's the answer isn't the answer. And sometimes, like this COVID stuff, one question leads to 10 others, right? So sometimes we spin around in this area, like trying to find a cure for cancer. We've been spinning around in this information for a long time. So, it is something that may be painstakingly slow sometimes, maybe not that exciting, but it is something that is very valuable in the whole process of the scientific method. Okay. And by the way, you may have noticed I skipped over a video. I will post all these notes online as soon as I get through all these videos and through all the notes in class. Before the test, I always post them, and then you'll have an opportunity to, if you want to watch some of these videos. It's a pretty funny one. It's a Monty Python one. I'm just not going to take the time to show you right now, but it is pretty funny, and you can see the scientific method in kind of a crazy, little unorthodox way, but it does go through that. So eventually, I will put this on as soon as I get through the next couple of days, and you can click on some of these videos. I'm kind of skipping over to save a little time. All right, one more slide. A little longer notes today. Sorry about that, but I want to make sure you get this all in so it'll help you with your labs. Okay. And now finally we get to the experimenting part. That's the part we want to get to, right? That's the fun part. That's the part that students like to do, scientists like to do. Okay. Now I'm going to give you a little bit of an assignment probably tomorrow online that goes through independent and dependent variable a little bit more. It's actually from Mythbusters. It's really good. It's a process of testing a hypothesis. Experimenting is testing your predictions, your hypotheses usually. Okay. Now, every good experiment has a control group, and every experiment has independent, dependent variables, including our paper airplane lab. You notice I said the bald eagle was a control group. The reason you have a control group is you have something to compare to. You know what's going to happen. You know what the results a lot of times are. Like if I'm doing a chemistry experiment, I always have water sitting in a beaker that I know nothing's going to happen in. But when I do my experiment, I can compare it to the water and see if there's a change. Okay. So it's something that's important. It's identical. Everything's the same in a control group, except you change one thing. So let's look at the paper airplane, right? All the paper airplanes were made of the same paper. All paper airplanes were thrown from a given spot and measured the same way. The only thing we changed was the designs, right? How we folded it and the different wings and that type of thing. Okay. So that is what the independent variable is. If this makes sense, it is what we change. So if you look at this slide, that's basically what I'm talking about. It is what we change. If something happens in my experiment, that is what caused it. Now understand, let me explain this because this is really important part of experimentation. Okay. You only change one thing. Because if you change two or three things, let's say I changed the weight of the paper, I changed the design, I changed how we threw it. Now I don't know what caused one plane to fly further than the other. If I just change one thing, in this case, just the design, we used the same size paper, we threw the same way, everything was the same, except what design of plane did I have. That is the independent variable. In every experiment, you got to figure this out. So get this in your brain that the independent variable is what we change in the experiment, and we only change one factor. Okay. The dependent variable is what we measure. You can see it here. And the dependent's always on the y, just like we did our graph. On the x-axis is always the independent variable. We do every lab this way. Okay. What did we measure? Now understand, dependent variables can be a lot of different measurements. We may be measuring volume. We may be measuring length. We may be measuring duration, how long something stays in the air. We could have done a lot of different things with these planes, right? But you're always going to have a dependent variable as well. So I'm always going to have something I'm going to measure, and I'm going to have something that I'm going to change, okay? And I know that sounds simple, and I know even in sixth grade you were taught that because my wife does a lesson on dependent and independent variables in sixth grade. So I know you've heard this stuff before, but it's not bad to kind of revisit and go through that a little bit. All right. So understand that that's really, really important to any scientific investigation. Okay. So we run our experiments, we gathered data, we threw our planes, we measured how far they all went, we did the averages, we did the graph. Now what? Well, now we're finally going to get to the end. And every lab's going to have this, and you need to do this on your lab as well. And that's drawing conclusions. Okay. Final step. I told my class this the other day. I'm going to tell you guys the same thing. It's like I write this suspense novel on who did it, who murdered the person. I write this nice suspense. We're reading all these chapters, and we get to the best part of the novel. We're going to find out who did it, and then I don't put the last chapter in. Well, then everybody's mad because there's no closure, right? You have to have closure. So Conclusions we'll do on every lab. And a lot of times students forget this. I want you to summarize. What did I learn in the lab? What did we accomplish? What did we do? Okay. Did I prove my deep independent variable change the experiment? Did I do my dependent variable correctly? Did I do the measuring? And remember that drawing conclusions, usually it's a written statement. Or it could be verbal. It could be mathematical. It might be, my conclusion might be I made a DNA model. Here's my DNA model. It's a visual thing. Okay. Especially in biology, we use all three of those, so it's not just, doing a graph or doing some table. We did on the paper airplane, but now when we do the microscope lab, it's going to be a picture. You're going to draw what you see. I'm going to send you what's in the microscope, because obviously I can't send you a microscope, but I'm going to send you what you see, and then you have to draw a picture of it and explain what you're looking at. All right. Now, last thing. I know it's kind of long, and then I'll be quiet. But last thing is understand that data that we gather during experiment can be quantitative, like the paper airplane experiment, where we're putting down the plane flew 155 centimeters on an average. That is quantitative. That is a mathematical number. Okay. It means we quantify. You may have heard that in math class before. Okay. Or, especially in science, it might be qualitative, where I'm putting down what did I see, the qualities. It can't actually be measured. I'm observing a grizzly bear in the wild. How did it behave? That's not something I can put in a mathematical equation. I'm looking at a microscope at a piece of plant. What do I see? I got to describe what I see. I see little green cells or whatever. So you can use both of those, and we'll use both of those in biology and science a lot. So let me say that again, because this is really important. Good quiz question. Quantitative, a mathematical expression, a number, a table, a graph. Qualitative, descriptive, pictures, qualities, field journals, things like that. All right. So hopefully that makes sense. And we're going to do another lab and kind of emphasize this a little bit. I want to kind of show you one more slide, and then I'm going to be quiet. And then we're going to talk a little bit about microscopes in the next lesson. There you can see a model of the scientific method. And what I want to show you is sometimes we do a loop. Sometimes it doesn't go nice and straightforward like the green lines. Be nice. Most of our labs will, because they've been done before. But in real life, sometimes we do this. Sometimes we're like, oh, the hypothesis didn't work, so I'm going to go back and make a new one. Test it again. Didn't work. Right here's where we're spinning COVID-19, and it's in the circle right now. Finding cures for cancer, we're in the circle right now. Doesn't mean we give up. Just means that sometimes we have to reload and rethink and look at data maybe a little differently, and maybe something new has come up, and that's how things work. All right. A lot of notes today. Sorry if I'm getting you caught up, because again, I'm trying to fit this in where I can. This is a little bit different than we've done before. So hopefully that makes sense. If not, I'm going to have a Google Meet with you on Friday, same time, same place. And remember, you need to show up for those Google Meets. That's your attendance for the Friday. So I will be a little more prompt. I'll get there on time this time. And I'm going to see you at the same time. And I'll post that on Google Classroom again for you, what time you need to show up. And make sure you show up, because it's important that you show up and we can answer some questions. I can tell you a little bit about the e-learning and all that good stuff. All right. Hey, have a good day, and we'll talk to you later. See ya. Bye.